Well, thanks for having me down. That's on? Yes. Thanks for having me down here today, guys. I actually wear a number of different hats, and when I was asked to present today, I didn't know which hat to wear, so I'm going to wear a number of hats and put them all on in different parts. Unfortunately, I'm a lawyer by trade, so don't shoot me for it, but that's my background, and I'm still actually practicing law at a law firm day to day. But I've been involved in the industrial hemp industry for now just on 3 and a bit years. I'm a non-executive director of a company called Fibre, and we came at the whole industry problem from a market and demand first approach rather than a supply and processing approach. We're working with some entities, which again, before anyone asks, I can't tell you about because we're under confidentiality, right? But we're working with some large groups who are very interested specifically in the plastics area, but also in the construction area to trial, and we are currently undertaking and have undertaken a number of trials in the plastics and construction space of using obviously industrial hemp as a percentage replacement for some of their fossil fuel alternatives at the moment. And the biggest, I suppose, the learnings from my last 3 years of going to board meetings and going to fundraising meetings, etc., is the conversation around scale, all the things we've talked about today. So scale, how fast can we process, how fast can we grow, how fast can we satisfy the demand? Because when a trial goes well, which invariably after a few goes they do, the next question becomes, well, if we're going to replace our product line with, say, 50% hemp in our plastics product range, where's the supply coming from? Where's it going to be decorticated? How are we going to get the certainty of the supply chain that allows us to move forward? And from what I've seen, even though from some of the stuff that Hep and Ag were talking about, there's been leaps and bounds made in the last sort of 12 to 18 months. What we've found is individually within this industry, because it is still a little bit cottage and it's growing, right, and it's a bit fragmented, that individually different segments of the industry can't actually provide the demand or the certainty on their own, right? So I thought rather than sit here today and talk to you about the problems, which I think we all know what the problems are and how we're going together, I thought I'd put my legal hat on and also talk to you about a structure that we could all potentially use to actually scale quicker and to raise money quicker and to obviously supply the demand quicker. And that's via a cooperative model. Now, obviously people understand what cooperatives are. It's been used in the farming industry. It's been used in lots of different industries a lot. But at the end of the day, a cooperative vehicle can be a really, really good vehicle to take the great work of AHC and even the CRCs and stuff that are going forward and actually provide a structure for fundraising, a structure for shared resourcing, a structure for shared infrastructure that allows people to participate for profit, not in a not-for-profit way, whilst also operating their own businesses, right? So they still operate their own businesses in their own right, but they join together under a codified set of principles and rules in order to allow the supply and the demand and the processing capability to come together quicker. So I thought I'd talk to you a little bit about that today, just to stir some potential thoughts and questions around the potential for that happening, because I see it as a way to commercialise the industry and scale the industry much quicker than may otherwise happen if we're all doing it in our own silos and having our own projects and partnerships, which will obviously occur, but they'll occur piecemeal and over a longer period of time. So there's a little bit just about me. I'm also working with Pro Hemp at the moment. Matt Box over there in a joint venture for providing some processing capability to some of the trial projects that we have at the moment. And I'm involved in Fibre, and we're working obviously largely in the plastics trials area, where we've been able to successfully produce plant pots, paint accessories, and different things to go into obviously product lines such as you see in Bunnings and other things. And we're now at the point where we need to justify the supply chain and justify the way it's all put together. So, I mean, this has all been said before. I don't need to go through it. The problem with obviously the industry is at the moment is there's no what I call commercialisation, and I'll go through some figures in a minute. In every conversation I've had about commercialisation, there needs to be a level of supply, a level of processing at a particular rate, and there needs to be a level of to supply that demand at a particular metric. And at the moment, even though I'm glad to see that some people are going on leaps and bounds and actually trying to solve that problem, we're not there yet, and I think there's some work to do, and we could all band together under a cooperative model to make that work. So let's just talk about scale and supply and demand. The amount of investor meetings I've been in where we've needed to justify the amount of CapEx that's required, and obviously the OpEx requirements, but largely CapEx that's required to sustain the industry, is roughly this: 1,000 hectares, at approximately 10 tonne per hectare, about $10 million in infrastructure investments, about 5 tonne processing per hour on a 10-hour day, 400 tonnes per tonne raw pricing from the farming community, 1,500 a tonne, this is all approximate figures of course depending on what you're doing, of processed hemp, and about $1.50 a kilo if you're looking at putting into a plastics process. Now I know these are rough figures, okay, and it's particular to specific industries and specific areas, but that's what I call a minimum viable product from a financial sense. Not from a can we produce a product sense, but from a financial sense, that's what your larger, your VCs and players are looking for, if not tomorrow, in a scaled capacity together, right? And so, in my opinion, scale can only be brought quickly if we have multiple industry participants in a collective joint venture, and that effectively is a cooperative, right? So if we come together under a collective joint venture, right, and parties can participate in different membership classes and in different ways, and I'll go through that shortly, there's a way in which we could all potentially utilise the infrastructure we have together. Just as a few questions we're having before, can we utilise our, BAS requirements here for our fibre requirements there? Well, this kind of structure would allow that to occur more seamlessly and allow people to avail themselves of the infrastructure that's brought to the cooperative. So a genuinely industry-owned cooperative is what I'm proposing is the commercialisation vehicle, and it's been used many, many times for new industries, right? So personally, I've been involved in setting up both commercially and legally 10 cooperatives in the agriculture industry and the financial services industry in different areas. And so I've got a bit of experience on how they are structured and how they come together. But it effectively, because of the fact that it's a participation for all model, it allows the whole of industry to be serviced, right? Rather than individual projects or companies and joint ventures being set up in different areas and then trying to work together. This actually allows a shared infrastructure model, which also allows for sharing, obviously, shared funding, knowledge and resourcing, and the common requirements across the multiple projects. So this is not a project vehicle. This is a overarching vehicle that would encompass projects that would be brought to the cooperative, and then shared resources and funding could be brought either on a project by project basis, or for example, a scaled decortication plant that needed an extra $10 million of funding. Now, how would that occur? And a lot of people say a cooperative vehicle is a bad vehicle to be funded, but there is a beautiful little thing, if you weren't aware, called a capital cooperative unit, right? And I'll skip through, actually, to that in a second. So if you look at the funding requirement there's a little thing called a capital cooperative unit, which is a unit which is designed specifically to allow people to invest in a cooperative and get a direct return, right? So even though a cooperative model is one member, one vote, which means no one participant or member can control it or it doesn't matter if they put in 5 million or 2 million or 100 million, they can't have a controlling vote or 51% because every member has one vote when it comes to the running of the cooperative and the representation. But if they do put in 50 million, they can have 50 million CCUs as opposed to someone that puts in 1 million and can have one CCU. So the point is you can actually get a direct return for your capital investment, which allows your traditional funding houses to actually get the return that they want in a slightly different way. So rather than getting equity in a company, or rather than structuring it in a debt capacity, they can actually structure it in the way of a capital cooperative unit. And the beauty of that unit is it actually can be constructed as a blended debt equity instrument, right? And you can actually create the terms which are specific to the rate of return that the investor wants. So if we do set up a cooperative in this industry, you can actually utilise that capital cooperative unit to fund different projects or to fund the general infrastructure requirements themselves in a traditional funding way, but without having a specific equity component that's taken by the funding entity in a particular project or a particular entity. Let me just go back a little bit. Sorry, wrong way. So as I said before, a cooperative is no control, so one member, one vote. So it allows people to actually contribute and be involved without the fear of having a larger party or a party with more money coming in and making all the decisions. And the way that it's actually put together is you create a cooperative purpose. Now, I've had a bit of a go at creating a cooperative purpose up here on the board for this industry. It's actually done by the people that participate in the founding the cooperative, and it's something that we would work on together. But effectively, the cooperative purpose would be to materialise a sustainable future through the provision of the necessary capacity and capability to commercialise hemp in Australia. I've just defined there a little bit, materialise being the product development and manufacturing from across industry. Sustainable future obviously is looking towards the carbon emission reductions towards carbon zero future, and there's obviously lots of angles there, obviously which we brought in that respect. Capacity obviously talks about the industrial scale supply chain, and we're talking about the actual ability for the amount of growing capacity that's required to go through the supply chain. We're talking about capability, which is mechanical and digital technologies to support that process, right? And obviously, the big one here is commercialise, is connecting that supply and demand for collective profit, right? So at the moment, we've either got supply and demand and everyone's trying to join the dots between it. But if there was a vehicle where all the demand could come and all the supply could come under particular terms, you could actually start creating the necessary scale in a lot quicker fashion. So the way a cooperative is effectively set up is you have your founding shareholders, right? So there are shareholders in the cooperative, but they're not entitled to dividends like a normal shareholder would be. All they are is the founding ones that drive the strategy. So you have to have a minimum of 5 founders in a cooperative, but you can have as many as 1,000. Not advisable to have 1,000 founders, otherwise you have 1,000 voices, right? But you have hopefully a minimum of 5, maybe between 5 and 20 founders that actually set up the cooperative and the rules. And what it means is like effectively an industry standard, right, where people know how they're participating and on what terms they participate with each other. Then you've got the funding, which I talked about before, which is the capital cooperative unit, which can be offered in respect of any particular project or any particular infrastructure requirements or funding that's required. And then you've got your supply chain participants. So within a cooperative, you have membership classes, and the membership classes can go down each the different path about whether someone's in the supply area, the demand area, the infrastructure area, product development and manufacturing, R&D, and then you can look at even corporates such as the high carbon emitters and sustainability funds and how they can participate in the cooperative and become members and contribute. And at the end of the day, you can even, with cooperatives, include consumers as end users of the products as part of that entire supply chain. So it's actually up to everyone here, if there was an interest in setting up a cooperative, to actually define exactly what you want the cooperative to be and how you define your membership classes and how you define what it is that you have in terms of shared resources and shared profitability. So I suppose the purposes of today was to talk about whether or not, and to stimulate some conversation and thought about whether or not there were some, all, any in the room that would be interested in looking at setting up a cooperative on particular terms to create what I'm calling the minimum viable product. What I mean by that is those figures I put up before about how much supply, demand and processing capability we need to call ourselves an industry, right, to move forward. And everyone's doing that in their own right and they're all doing a great job, but there might be a way to do it collectively and better. And I'm just proposing that as a potential food for thought, right, that might be explored by the people in this room. Really, just to give you an idea, to set up a cooperative would cost about $100,000 in legals and accounting requirements, because it's actually setting up the entire business rules. It's not just going down to ASIC and putting in a proprietary limited $1,500 and setting up a company. You actually set up all the rules and all the requirements of the cooperative and the standards up front. So you do that, and then you have your founding members. So you'd need some founders that are prepared to be on the board and set up the foundation of the cooperative, and you need a minimum of 5. And then from there, you effectively create the cooperative and then invite any member of the industry to participate as either an Indian membership class, as either an investment class or as a participant class of membership, and we participate together to grow the industry quicker. And the idea here is to create a structure that people can have confidence in from a supply, processing and demand capability, so that funds can readily flow into it and we can actually start processing the demand we know is already out there and existing right now. That's it, guys. I just wanted to maybe just share a few food for thought in my experience in this industry in the last 3 years and propose a potential model that might work.